Grok 4.5 outputs tokens 63% faster than Kimi K3, and that speed gap is verified by artificial analysis, not marketing copy. We're talking 53.3 tokens per second versus 32.4, and that difference is big enough to change which model you should actually be paying for. These two models are competing for the same developer budget right now, and the gap between them is not obvious at all. So I pulled published benchmarks from Artificial Analysis, Benchable, and Vendor Docs, comparing Grok 4.5 versus Kimi K3 across 5 real tests, no vendor spin, only verified numbers. And honestly, the final call surprised me, because the cheaper model is not automatically the worse one. If you're paying $15 per $1 million output tokens with Kimi K3, you might be overpaying for something Grok 4.5 can handle at $6, or maybe not, and that's what I want to actually figure out here. This comparison is for developers and teams picking an API model who don't want to waste money or ship something slow. The wrong pick here costs you real dollars at scale, and it costs you user experience when response times drag, and that's not abstract, that's your app. Test 1, web search. If your model's web search is pulling stale or irrelevant results, users notice immediately, and that's a trust problem you don't recover from easily. Both Grok 4.5 and Kimi K3 claim they have web search tools, so let's see what the data actually says. What I found here was kind of frustrating, honestly. Grok 4.5 has what it calls up-to-date web search, and Kimi K3 has a web search tool too, but there are 0 independent benchmarks on latency or result quality for either one. So on screen you're seeing 2 check marks and no numbers, because there are no numbers. I want to be straight with you guys about this. The fact that both models have the feature doesn't tell us which one is actually better at it, and until someone runs a controlled test with real queries and measures relevance, this is genuinely a coin flip, and I'm not going to pretend otherwise. I was expecting at least one of them to have some published search quality data, and what actually happened is neither does. So web search is a tie, and it has to be, because the data just isn't there. That puts us at Grok 4.5 0, Kimi K3 0, with one test tied. Test 2, reasoning and problem solving. When a model gets this wrong, it doesn't just give you a bad answer, it gives you a confident bad answer. And that's the kind of thing that slips through review and causes real problems downstream. So this one matters a lot. Alright, so on the AI Intelligence Index from Artificial Analysis, Kimi K3 scored 57.11 and Grok 4.5 scored 53.83, which is a 3.28 point gap on a composite test. And that's pretty meaningful. Grok 4.5 did hit 100% on Benchable's reasoning baseline, but there's no Kimi K3 score to compare against that one. Take this with a grain of salt, though. The Intelligence Index is a composite score averaging across a bunch of different tasks, and Grok's perfect 100% on a narrower baseline suggests it's not weak at reasoning, it just didn't outscore Kimi K3 on the broader composite. The gap is real, but it's not a knockout. Honestly, I went in thinking Grok 4.5 might hold its own here given the speed advantage, but Kimi K3 takes reasoning because its 57.11 composite is clearly ahead of 53.83, and that's a real gap. So now we're at Kimi K3 1, Grok 4.5 0, with one tied. Test 3, response speed. Slow token output kills user experience in real-time apps, and if your chatbot or coding assistant is lagging, users don't wait around, they bounce. At high volume, even a small speed difference compounds into a massive difference in how your product actually feels. This one was not close. Artificial Analysis clocked Grok 4.5 at 53.3 tokens per second median output speed and Kimi K3 at 32.4, which is a 63% speed advantage for Grok 4.5. Now, XAI claims 80 TPS in marketing materials, but real-world testing settles at 53.3, so that's the number I'm going with. Worth noting, though, we only have Grok 4.5's time to first token data, which is 8.27 seconds median, and we don't have that number for Kimi K3, so the full latency picture is incomplete. If your app is sensitive to how fast the first word appears rather than overall throughput, this comparison doesn't fully answer that question. I was expecting a gap, but 63% faster is way bigger than I thought it'd be, and Grok 4.5 takes speed, no contest, 53.3 versus 32.4 tokens per second. That ties the overall score, so we're now at Grok 4.5 1, Kimi K3 1 with one test tied. Test 4, multi-language support. If you're shipping a product to users in multiple countries and the model fumbles a language, you don't just get a bad output, you potentially lose that user segment entirely. So for anyone building globally, this dimension is a real business risk. Okay, so what I found here was honestly a little shocking. BenchLM reports 0 multilingual benchmarks for Grok 4.5, and Kimi K3 doesn't have published multilingual data either. So on screen you're seeing nothing, because there's nothing to show. Neither model has put out independent multilingual test results. Now, Kimi K3 comes from Moonshot AI, which is a Chinese company, so there's a reasonable assumption it handles Chinese well. But reasonable assumptions aren't data. If you're building for non-English users, you're genuinely flying blind with both of these models until someone publishes actual tests. I was expecting Kimi K3 to at least have some multilingual data given its origins, but neither model showed up with anything verified, so this is another tie, and it has to be. The scoreboard stays at Grok 4.5 1, Kimi K3 1, now with 2 tests tied. Test 5, API, and ecosystem. If you pick a model that doesn't fit your existing toolchain, you're rewriting integration code, and that's hours of work you didn't budget for. And if the token pricing is off by even a small amount per million, that compounds fast when you're running millions of API calls a month. So here's what surprised me. Grok 4.5 costs $2 per $1 million input tokens and $6 per million the output tokens, while Kimi K3 is $3 input and $15 output, which means 60% cheaper on output for Grok 4.5, and that's a big deal at scale. Grok also has OpenAI compatible endpoints and Cursor IDE integration, which Kimi K3 doesn't match. I was expecting Kimi K3's open weight release to tip this in its favor, and honestly, that's a real advantage for self-hosting. But Grok 4.5's cost edge and OpenAI compatibility balance it out, so this one lands as a tie. Final scoreboard, Grok 4.5 1, Kimi K3 1, 3 tests tied. Grok 4.5 wins on speed, 53.3 tokens per second versus 32.4, that's 63% faster, and it wins on cost, $2 input and $6 output per million tokens versus $3 and $15. It's got OpenAI compatible endpoints, so you're not rewriting your stack, and it's natively integrated into Cursor IDE for coding workflows. Kimi K3 wins on composite reasoning, 57.11 versus 53.83 on the AI Intelligence Index, and it has a published deep SWE coding score of 67.5, which Grok 4.5 doesn't even have a comparable number for. Its open weight release, scheduled by July 2026, also means you can self-host it, which is a real advantage for privacy-sensitive work. Honestly, I went in thinking one model would pull ahead clearly, and what I got was a real split. So here's the decision rule. If you need speed and low cost at scale, pick Grok 4.5, $6 per million output tokens, that's the number. If you need deeper reasoning or you want to self-host eventually, Kimi K3 is probably your pick.